Start with your questions for Joe. Yes?
Do you know how many journalists have been killed since the start of this uprising?
The official number is about 10, but obviously there could be more that haven't been reported. So obviously the revolution garnered quite a bit of press attention. It'd be hard to get sneak them kind of things past the Western media. So they've reduced to more like bullying and intimidation and harassment rather than just straight up killing people, but there might be more that have been unreported.
Okay. Any other questions for Joe? Yes?
Do you think Egypt will ever break away from the cycle of dictatorships?
Possibly, because at the moment it's quite hard because they keep going back under military rule, which the population don't seem to like, and obviously it can heighten censorship and stuff, so maybe, but I think for the foreseeable future we're going to keep going in that same cycle of being a dictatorship and then military rule again, because it's already happened twice in the past few years.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yes?
You mentioned that they imposed restrictions on the internet before the uprising and the revolution. Do they still do it now?
I couldn't say 100% for sure. I know it's monitored, and that they cut the 3G obviously during the revolution, but I couldn't say for sure if there's still any restrictions now. But I would imagine that there would be, at least mainly on social media and stuff like that, to stop the same thing happening again.
Any other questions? No? Okay, questions for Dewi, please. Yes?
You mentioned at the end that self-censorship in Bahrain was like a pretty big deal. People were censoring themselves quite a lot out of fear. What proves to be sort of the key factor in cancelling that out and leading to the uprising?
I suppose a lot of it was seeing the other Arab nations going through revolutions, and then Bahraini citizens realising that their government, even though it was unfairly in power, wasn't nearly as brutal, so they may as well start being more open with their voice, because the king has, since the uprisings, promised to follow through on some reforms, and he has loosened some restrictions. So they saw that it was working in other countries, and then they realised that the government wouldn't be as violent towards them as, say, Syria or Egypt would have been.
Okay. Any other questions? Yes?
One of your slides said that, a quote, as long as Bahrain doesn't modernise its language, there's no need for a revolution. But do you think that means as long as they stay set in their ways, then there's no need for change?
Well, as long as they stay set in their ways, the people won't have the mindset for revolution. Until they start thinking about using their language to spread ideals like freedom and republicanism, the people won't consider that to be a possibility.
Thanks. Any other questions? Yes?
Do you think Bahrain's on its way to become partly free?
I think so, yes, because the government has been following through on some reforms, and they've been having observers from the UN there to watch some of the by-elections that they've been having, and Bahrain is definitely making progress.
Yes?
Is the opposition newspaper still available, or has it been discontinued from circulation?
I believe Al-Wasat is now back in business. I think it can still print, for now at least.
Any other questions? Thanks. And now questions for Holly, please. Yes?
Do you know why Saudi Arabia fell 5 places on the Press Freedom Index?
Obviously after Arab Springs, that was a knock-on effect of that, because after the Arab Springs they had that second wave repression, so they really tightened their control of the media. And as well, at that particular area of the table, countries have moved up and down, where they've gone from being not free to partly free, so it's just a knock-on effect of that as well.
Yes?
Other than self-censorship and punishment from the government, is there any other type of censorship?
There's obviously the like their idea of what media is supposed to be. So they say you kind of maintain public standards, that kind of thing. But they haven't actually got any formal written laws, which is why punishment in Saudi Arabia is controversial, because one judge could say that it's an offence, one might not. So it is largely just self-censorship.
As the 8th most censored country, which is obviously fairly high, how do you think 5.2 million people are still allowed, so to speak, to use Facebook?
I think, obviously, I don't live there, so I can't exactly say what it's like to use Facebook over there. But I would imagine it's because the government do still want to give the people that, you know, some sort of freedom. But they still do monitor Facebook really closely.
Right.
And anything controversial is taken down because, like the Royal Decree said, they can interfere if there's anything that's going to threaten public welfare.
Okay, yes.
You mentioned at the start like the religious affiliation between the government and sort of the royal family, how their principles are sort of embedded in divinity. Do you think that provides sort of an extra dimension to the relationship of the people with the government? Because obviously religious extremism in that part of the world is a lot more common than it is here. Do you think the rebellion carried sort of religious significance, or was it mostly political motivated?
I think it depends, because politics and religion in Saudi Arabia are so close knit. You can't really get kind of any politics without religion embedded into it. I do think obviously religion had some part to play because it's a highly religious country. But I couldn't really comment on that. That's a really difficult question actually. I couldn't really comment on that one.
Okay. Yes, Matthew?
Do you think Saudi Arabia would go into a full-blown revolution if Saudi Arabia continues to tighten its laws?
I think the way that they're doing it at the minute is a series of kind of activists. So the women are rebelling against not being able to drive, and journalists are continuing to push the boundaries, that kind of thing. But I can't see a rebellion yet. Maybe if the restrictions were imposed a lot tighter, then maybe see it then. But I can't see it right now.
Okay. Any other questions? No? And now questions for Curtis, please. Yes?
You're saying that the state of journalism has improved, so how has
I don't know what's happening.
Sorry. Yes, go on.
There's not as much like oppression coming from the government, so the government are allowing them to write more of their own stuff rather than just what the government want you to write. So obviously they're allowed to write if the government does bad, rather than just saying the government's good all the time when they're not.
Okay. Yes?
You mentioned that it's a lot safer now in Iraq, or there have been improvements at least, but it does hold the record for the most deaths since 1922. Do you think holding that record is why things are changing, or do you believe that number like supports that there's still got a long way to go before anything actually changes?
I think it's partly because they hold that record, but I think it's since Saddam Hussein has gone, it's improved, because there's not one figure that's oppressing. It's more like groups of people, like arms dealers and things like that, and as they're slowly dwindling out, there's not as much of a threat towards journalists, so it's improving slowly that way.
Any other questions? Yes?
Would you implement the censorship techniques if you were control of Iraq, in Iraq yourself?
Not really. I don't really know what to say.
Probably explain why not.
Do you want me to explain my question?
Yeah, yes, please.
Say if you were head of the government that came after Saddam Hussein, would you still implement censorship to stop violence or any?
Yes, it'd be, if they implemented different forms of censorship than the ones they previously had, then it would be safer for them to be journalists.
I don't know what that is. Do we have any other questions? Yes?
You say with like obviously America puts in a lot of funding at them. So like when the external powers pull out like they're proposed to, do you reckon they have the foundations to be on their way to be a free press?
Not at the present time now, because a lot of the current reforms being made by America, they say a lot of people within the country feel they're sloppy and haven't had a lot of thought put into them, so as soon as they're removed they think it will just collapse. So that's the thoughts from inside the country.
Any other questions? No? The people who didn't get a chance to ask questions, would you like to ask any questions? No? Yes?
That's about right. On the presentation mentioned that free journalism kills, but there's been no other kind of like intimidation or attending violence. Do you know if there's a reason for that, or is it like just something?
I think it's because the threats come from external attacks rather than the government, so there's nobody to enforce hostage situations. So it's literally I think it's death or you're fine. Pretty much.
Okay, thank you very much. A round of applause for the presenters.